Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
All right, and welcome to this episode of the podcast. I'm your host, David Wentworth, Managing Director of Learning and Talent at Brandon Hall Group. And today I am joined by Mahesh Kumar, who is the founder as well as a Managing Director for TraineryHCM, which we'll get into a little bit more about what that is. But Mahesh, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks for this opportunity. It's been a great honor for us to be in this podcast. I really would love to spend more time with you, understand how the market is and all that. I really take this opportunity and thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And I think what's interesting and something a little different I'd like to do today is because you are a founder of a technology solution, a provider, we don't
Yes.
often get to those folks. So typically we just jump right in and we start talking about the industry and trends and so forth. I think what's interesting to me and might be interesting to folks to hear about is how did you end up here, right? Like we could talk about how we ended up here from an industry perspective, but as a founder, someone who has created this type of company, this type of solution, what brought you here? What's the history?
It's a great question, right? So my background is quite different and interesting. I started off almost 25 years back in Wall Street. I have done my master's in computer science and master's in business administration in NYU. And since then, I've been working in Wall Street for 20 plus years, split into four major companies like JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, and UBS. So this gave me an opportunity to work in three different continents, say Asia, Europe, and the US. So I worked in all these three continents. I actually have a global perspective in products and solutions and market and go-to-market strategy and all the good things. After 20 plus years, I kind of got bored in the sense it takes a different level of involvement to really grow in Wall Street. And I was looking for something to do entrepreneurially. And I got an opportunity to do a consulting effort, and that turned into me acquiring the consulting company. And one thing led to another. And then we were looking for a content provider that led into us acquiring a company called Training Network. From there, TraineryHCM was born. It was because of our requirement to do something for our clients that led to us changing our direction. And I call myself an accidental SaaS founder. That was not the intended with which we started, but it turned out to be that over a period of time. That's because of our client demands and where we were and where we were heading, and just an accidental thing. But now I enjoy it. I love it because this is a great time to be in this business. It provides you an opportunity and a challenge that no other industry can, especially with AI and everything that's coming up.
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting ride, at least for the last few years. I would say, I've been doing this kind of work for close to 20 years since the advent of the pandemic through now. It's been quite a ride during that 20 some odd years of working on Wall Street and these different organizations, these different continents, were you sort of like, I don't know, in the back of your mind, storing away some of these challenges that you're trying to solve now? Did it come back to you as you were putting this together? Like, these are the things that we need to try to solve.
Yes, some of them were financial industry specific. So that doesn't come into play at all, right? So we just don't think about it that much. But some of them, yes, especially the scalability of a solution that is for enterprise, right? So scalability is one thing that we always used to wonder, how come a software is providing services to an enterprise that's got 300,000 employees, things like that, right? Scalability is one thing that I always learned as to how these things are shaping up. One. The second piece that was interesting was people management, right? There are lots of areas where we really have to bring in technology, talent, and people and process and everything to get up to speed. There are certain things I really learned from Wall Street being there, how to manage a project, how to manage a process, how to deliver solutions. And you keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, right? So those are the things that really help me. And of course, the third piece is for you to be able to have a GTM strategy, learning from how your industry goes to market and what you learn from it. How do you market your products and services? So there are some things that I picked up from big ticket firms, but they are so big. Some of them are not applicable for a startup, but you get to know how to scale your organization, how to scale your product, how to scale your offering. So those are things that are valuable wherever you go.
So let's stick with the scalability issue for a minute and talk a little bit about how you're working to solve for that. Because I would imagine since the time when you first started thinking about it as a challenge, the challenge itself has evolved
Yes.
tremendously, right? And
Oh, yeah.
in a lot of ways, so many things that at the beginning have probably been solved for, and generally just the way in which systems work and the way they are interoperable, the ways that compared to how they used to be, even down to bandwidth and computing power, all those things. Like the scalability issue has shifted quite a bit. So in sort of today and looking a little bit into the future, what does sort of scalability mean to you, and what are some of the ways that you're trying to address it?
Yes. The way I look at scalability is not about handling how many users you are handling in a system, right? It is about handling the complex functionality and features and requirements without any friction. So as you are scaling, you are not supposed to correspondingly increase the friction. You're supposed to reduce the friction. So the way I look at scalability is as you should be having your product and functions without the complexity and friction. So that's one thing. And I think there are kind of three pillars for scalability. One is organizational, right? You generally have, when you talk about scalability, it becomes multi-entity, multi-location, or role-based attributes, and the architecture, the whole infrastructure becomes slightly different from an organization perspective. So the way I looked at scalability is you don't just store the structure, you just operationally make them work effectively. So the organizational aspect has to be changed by us to really make it scalable. The second piece is operational. So how do you improve the workflow automation? How do you improve the effectiveness of the system and all the technological functions, like whether it's simple things like ILT or any one of those training programs? The scalability also should improve your orchestration of your operational capability more effectively. So I call it like, you replace your manual coordination with a kind of a governed workflow. Like, so you kind of define that. So that's how you can scale. Otherwise, you're going to have a scalability problem, right? The third one is user experience or experience in general, right? How you define your user experience for all roles? How do they operate, right? Irrespective of the size of the client or organization, individual user experience must be so optimal that the scalability should not be a factor, right? Irrespective of the size of the organization. At any given time, one individual is in the system and he or she must experience a usability that is appropriate for them, right? So that means your screens must be clean, your dashboards, and like, I'm kind of like really on that because most of the time I work with the developers to make sure I always say, hey, I need to make sure our users are experiencing that function. So we put ourselves in client's shoes and make sure the individual user experience is good, right? If your system needs training to use, it's probably going to find it difficult to scale. So the benchmark I kind of say is, I say it like, a normal user coming in without knowing much, they should be able to operate your system more effectively. That is scalability. So we kind of put this in different spectrum and try to address that. So the way I looked at scalability was slightly different from the way, because I come from a corporate world, which was much bigger in size. And so I had a different perspective on that one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a good way to look at the issue is from a perspective of complexity rather than size and numbers. I think often people think about scalability, they just think big. Well, okay, my company's going to grow. Even if we become more global and that our footprint grows, they think of it in terms of size. But it's like, well, what's the complexity that comes along with that? There's more systems, people, and as you were talking about it, I think the way to go about it is it's the idea of having a restaurant that caters to just a small number of patrons, and you can have a very interesting targeted menu, and everyone's like, wow, this is fantastic, it's very interesting. But then that grows to 1,000 people. This is where the numbers becomes the issue. It isn't how do I serve 1,000 people, right? Because that can be done. But how do we do it in a way that each of those people feels as though they're getting the experience?
Yes,
Right?
that is so true. That is so true. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're describing is the ability it's like, yeah, we could reach tens of thousands of users, millions of users. It's like, how are we making sure that this one user out of these millions is having a very impactful, specific, targeted experience?
Right. So in a way, you're saying scalability is not about complex, it's not about headcount. It is about the complexity, right? And how do you mitigate that, not necessarily factor on the headcount?
Hmm.
Generally, we all think, oh, headcount. Headcount is just an attribute, but not necessarily the whole spectrum of what the scalability is.
Yeah. So, and I know that, one of the ways that as an organization, you're sort of thinking about this is kind of the modular way you've put together the solution, right? It isn't just here's the thing and take it and make it work. It's what pieces of this do you need to get it done, right? So explain that a little bit about like, what are the segments, what are the pieces of
Right,
the puzzle?
right. So you're talking about from the learn standpoint, right? The
Well, that's
learning.
one element right?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So yes, we grew organically in a way in the modules and how we built it, right? So we started off something small, and over a period of time, there have been clients' requests, or clients needed additional functionality, and we were the first port of call. For some reason, they were always asking us, "Can you do this? Can you do that?" And so one thing led to another. We kind of built in a way that at the beginning, to be honest, at the beginning, we were building it kind of like, standalone kind of solution. And then we realized, oops, we are building in a way that is not optimal from a client standpoint, right? So we started thinking about how will a client benefit if we have a solution that is maybe from a marketing standpoint different, but from a client standpoint, it is one application where they are having a good experience, right? So from a technology standpoint, e-learning is different from a classroom learning. But from a L&D manager standpoint, learning is a learning, course is a course, program is a program. Yes, there are some slight differences here and there. So we kind of built that complexity into consideration as we built our architecture. And as you rightly pointed out, over a period of time, the architecture has changed for us because of the way we were organically growing the product. That led to our solution at some point becoming too complex. So we had to decouple and think about the scaling part, right? Once again, we had to say, how can we make this product workable for an average user who's not interested in anything but just to come and do his job and move on, right? So from this standpoint, he doesn't care about many of those things. We started thinking from a client standpoint, from an end user standpoint. We re-architected again and again. I wouldn't say we got it right the first time. We are constantly changing and we are evolving. We are learning from our mistakes as much as we are learning from what the market is. And then the curveball has been the AI, right? Suddenly AI is coming in from the left field, and like suddenly it's like everything that you designed, architected has to be re-architected, because if you look at some of the solutions in the market, it's like, if you are an established player, AI is more as a bolt-on to your product, because it's very difficult for you to change the architecture. It's difficult. It's not easy, right? So it's tempting for you to just bolt on your AI and say you are AI based product. But someone like us, we had an opportunity to weave the AI into our product, so it's actually part of the product. It's not necessarily an add-on. So it has added to our offering in terms of what it can do, and it's made it more user friendly, but it is also an expensive expedition for us to really go through that process of re-architecting everything we built just 2 years back. Once again, we are re-architecting. So that's been a challenge for us: scalability, product innovation, and constant change in technology. I don't know what's in store 2 years from now, right? With all the things that are happening, it's both a challenge and an opportunity and an exciting time, right? I wouldn't have experienced in my corporate America because I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity that I'm getting now to do things that are very interesting.
Well, and you started it, so we're obligated to talk about AI. As every podcast being recorded now is obligated to talk about it in some way. But I think the way you brought it up gets at something. What I think is also, rather than say your solution leverages AI, right? Which is, we could have that conversation. I don't think that's as interesting as the way you started talking about it. Hey, we really had to rethink a bit about it and re-engineer to weave it in, and gave it that kind of thought. So that leads me to the organization as a whole. What is sort of the organizational view of AI, right? What's the way that your company had, what's the philosophy on it? I think it's important because everybody everywhere is saying AI powered, right? Everything.
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure what that means. I don't think it means much of anything anymore. I think what
Yeah.
really matters is, okay, for you specifically, you can ask this question of any provider, but for Trainery One, what's the philosophy around AI and why is that meaningful?
Yes. The way I see AI is both an opportunity and a challenge, right? The opportunity is for someone like us, it gives an opportunity for us to really build things that our clients want, and we can be surpassing some of the established players because we don't have the encumbrance that others have, and we don't have to worry about thousands and thousands of clients who might be impacted. So we have the opportunity to do something faster. The challenge is because AI is growing and expanding so fast, and it is also an expensive effort for us to really get to be a AI leading provider. We have to be careful in how we deploy our resources. The resources that we deploy have to be strategic, and it must be adding value to our clients if we ever want to have a client impacting AI. One of the things we have started almost a year back thinking about was just not get into the fade. The latest one is AI. Let's not talk about AI as just an AI, but see how a client can benefit from what we do. The way we approach AI was we cannot escape from it. It's going to be part of our life. We got to get used to it. We need to build some things that will help our clients. So if you ask me what is the strategy of the firm, our firm strategy was very simple, right? Yes, it is going to be part of us. We will do what is beneficial for our clients. So we took that approach rather than to look at it inward. We looked at more at from a client perspective. So for every module function and the 3 modules that we have built, we looked at it from a client perspective. How will they benefit? What will help them add value? And where can we build that? What is the guardrail for this, right? So every time when we started thinking about the features that we want to have, we also thought, what is a guardrail? Can a client turn off? Because we have some banks as our clients, some institutions that do not want to have AI as part of the process. So we have to build that guardrail at a client level, to a function level, to a simple module level, to make sure the guardrail is so strong that clients can turn on, turn off, and have some tracking and all the things that are part of your audit trail process. So we were clear on that strategy. The second piece was, so, okay, it must be client beneficial one. It must have some proper control and mechanism around it. And then we said, okay, these are the areas where we want to build our AI tools that will help both the management and the employee and anybody else who's using the system. So we broke down into each component and each function, and we started developing, and then we kind of prioritize what is important for our clients, where is the immediate value add, and so on and so forth, right? So we started building that. I'll give you a simple example. We have a job description management software that is for our clients in a account builder perspective, right? So most of the time, clients are migrating from their Windows Explorer folder to an automated solution. So you have bunch of stuff in your Explorer, and you want to take that and load it into the system. A traditional way would have been a very painful manual process. AI has automated. So taking that process and AI based upgrade to it has really improved client experience so dramatically. Just a case in point, right? So we took each of those functions and we wanted to find the maximum benefit for our clients and users, and we started implementing step by step. So we are in third inning of a baseball game in respect to our AI. And as I think more and more, the game itself is getting extended. So it's getting more and more opportunities for us to do it. Another example is, right, we were having some plans of how we want to do it. Suddenly, content creation has become it must be AI enabled. Otherwise, you are not there. So we had to kind of re-architect our product to make sure content creation in the learning part is available. So yeah, market is driving it. Our client experience is driving it, but sometimes market supersedes our decision and market-driven approach to some extent.
Yeah, the tough part is the market's not always right. I mean, I think
That's true.
it's thing, and you talk about it being early in a ball game, and you're so right, it is early, but then you started to realize there might not be an end, and I think it's going to continue to evolve. I always say that we're probably not going to talk about it like this in 2 years.
2 years,
It'll
yes,
be
it becomes table stake.
the conversation will be there. It's just going to be talking about it in different terms. A lot of this stuff will just be a given as the way technology works, and we'll be on to different challenges or the new challenges that it creates. But
Yes,
it's, continuously evolving. And I thought what's interesting is, I've had a few conversations with you and I've seen, the product and the solution. One thing that stuck out to me is when your team talks about these things, they don't come in with, the AI is the first thing out of the mouth. Like, it does this AI thing. Let me show it to you. It's always been, if you want to do this thing and you want to solve this, you do this and this, and this is how the AI fits into that. And I'm like,
yes,
that is the way it has to be. You have to
yes,
start with the conversation that we've been having before we ever started talking about AI. I have this problem. How do I solve it?
yes.
What does it look like when it's solved? And then, okay, this is how this works in it. I think you guys do a pretty good job of that for sure. So it reflects sort of that overall philosophy, I think, that you have. So where do you think, we talk a little bit about this never-ending game, where do you think we're headed, like as an industry anyway? I mean, we don't need to get into the world at large where we're headed from an AI perspective, but just for our little corner of the world.
Yes. If you look at it from the learn standpoint, right,
Uh-huh.
AI is going to be, as you said, table stake for any provider of any services. 6 months to a year from now, it's going to be part of your stuff, right? How are you then adding value? That doesn't change. The AI can only help you doing it, but how are you helping your clients, and clients benefit from your services? Are you solving their business problem? That doesn't change. So yes, AI is going to be just like any other technology. It's going to be part of your process. I think, as you said, at some point, we're not going to talk too much about AI. We're going to talk about, are you solving my problem? You, the software company, are you solving my problem? That is how clients are going to look at it. They're going to take it for granted. That's one area that it's going to become more like common. The other piece is we haven't looked at the guardrail as to how we are going to be defining the control process. How are we going to, who's going to be responsible for anything that goes out of control? And where does the liability reside? How is this going to shape up in the future? So that is, take the example of a class action lawsuit against Workday for having their HRIS system saying something about HRIS system, right? Let's not get into the detail, but you see where the market is also driving some attributes of how your application is behaving. So some of the things will flush out in the next couple of years as to how your software company must have a protocol or a policy or some type of a process in place. So anybody who's signing up for their software has an understanding of what their software policy is or AI software policy is. I think that is something that's probably going to come out more and more, because if you're going to subscribe to my software and these are the things I do, when you sign up for my software, you are agreeing to that software's attributes. So that is something that's going to come out more and more because I don't think the legalistic aspect of it has fully been flushed out. And so that's one thing that, at least in the US, which going to be an issue that has to be resolved. The big guys are going to worry about it. They're going to resolve it. And then we guys will understand what has to be done.
Well, I mean, and you touched on something that is such an issue, right? Is this idea of artificial intelligence, the broad definition, it covers a bunch of different things, but broadly, AI, it's, okay, it's machines that have learned by looking at what's already been done, right? And so this idea that we're going to rush into, and again, just looking at it from a talent perspective, just our little place in the world, but that we're going to rush in and use all these AI tools to solve all these problems. But the AI is only as smart as what we've already done. And so you're trying to tell me we've been doing everything so well up to this point, we can train our machines on it. And your example of work, there's been examples of other things. The hiring, I think at Amazon was one. This was a few years back. Mistakes will be made, but that's the point, is that you rush headlong into this. And the concept is, well, you're assuming that everything we've done up until now is right and good and perfect. And it's clearly not.
Clearly not. Yes. And we add that AI complexity to it. Now you're talking about another angle to it. And where is the liability, right? Is the liability with the software or with the company that incorporated it? And where does that land, right? So where is the disclaimer? And I don't see a disclaimer in many of the software I use, but eventually that's going to be something that if you're going to use my software, Anthropic says, I might be wrong, but that is not going to cut it more and more.
No, and I think from a learning technology, a talent technology perspective, you're talking with such a narrow slice of the world, right? Again, we're not looking at the vast entirety of the internet.
Yes.
We're talking about the things that we're doing.
Correct.
I'm not saying that we don't need disclaimers, but we need to be at a point where we wouldn't need that, because the point is you've got a very specific set of data, a very specific set of things that we're trying to do. These tools should be able to operate in a way that says, I know what I'm getting back is the best return, the best result, because it's not just going to make stuff up. It's not pulling stuff from crazy places. So I think there is an expectation when you get into narrow applications of AI within organizations, there is an expectation like, hey, here's my result, use it or not, but it's not my fault because it could be wrong.
Yes.
No one's going to put up with that.
That's a disclaimer. The software companies, even we are using it to say, hey, we might be wrong, just check with it. But eventually the confidence level of the users are going to go up, assuming that, yes, AI is doing its job correctly. It's going to be right. We don't have to worry about it. But there's a legalistic aspect that also has to catch up to make sure where is the issue? How are we resolving it? If there's a problem, and so on and so forth, right? So it's going to be a very interesting time, and most of these will be resolved in the next 6 months to 18 months time frame, right? It will be, as you said, people are going to
make room for new issues.
New issues, that is true.
So you've talked a little bit about learning as you go, learning from customers, even in the AI discussion, talking about, learning. And as a founder, and we talked about, sort of your journey, I think it might be interesting if you could share, are there any sort of lessons along the way that were not just, regular lessons, but kind of hard-earned lessons that you might want to be able to share? Because I think people are always interested in that too. Like, what have you been through?
Yeah. There are quite a few lessons we learned, and there are some mistakes we made along the way, and there are some things that opened up for us, right? One topic that I am quite open about is the fact that we have a long experience of working with content producers, content developers, and all that. We have had long history of relationship. We never translated that into a tangible 2020 solution, which was 5 years, 6 years back, right? We never converted that into an electronic digitization of our relationship. So we were still old fashioned. So we missed that boat quite a bit on this one. So that's to an extent that, it came from a legacy issues, and I woke up and then I realized, oops, that we have missed the boat. So there are things that we could have done better, but we were not even conceptualizing that early on. And we caught on with it, and now we are up and running, but there is a good period that we could have done some things, right? In terms of our ability to digitize our relationships into a tangible solution for our clients, that's one area where we could have done better. The other one is product innovation. The product innovation has been pretty much a slow moving process for us for a period of time. And that's because of so many things that are happening, the typical resource crunch issues and all the things. We have yes, there are cases where we could have prioritized some products better than others, right? So we kind of prioritized what one client was asking. So we started building for them and then realized that, that there's a limit as to what we could have done. We should have done what we thought is the right thing to do. So there are areas where we could have strategized better, but we
Mm.
learned over a period of time that little bit of market analysis would have helped us to say no to that client and do what we thought was the right thing to do. So these are some big ticket. Of course, on an everyday basis, we do a lot of mistakes here and there on technology solution, but at a high level, strategy level, yes, we could have done a few things different.
I think that would resonate with a lot of folks is the idea it is okay to say no to a client sometimes. I've been working with technology providers, solution providers for a couple of decades. Sometimes you hear them talk about, well, we got a big client, so we have this nice big logo we get to put on our page. Then that client pushes them around and makes them go down these pathways, and it's a trap. It's very difficult to get out of. So there's sometimes it's like, okay, maybe we give a little, but everything has to be a little bit more broadly applicable in the long run. So yeah, that's a very hard one to do when you're in the moment of like, well, it's really hard to say no, but
Yes.
it can be important. That's a great one to put out there. So where I want to end on is just, outside of AI, this would probably be the number 2 topic that everyone talks about. And it's somewhat related because it's creating this new environment. And you can talk about it in terms of AI or not. It's up to you. But skills. Everybody is talking about skills, whether it's the tools meant to assess them, the tools to build them, the internal struggles of defining what they are, knowing what's coming, all of it. It's been going on for a while. We've been talking about skills for many, many years. We change how we talk about it, but the issue still remains, right? And trying to figure it out, how we look at that. So one of the things that's curious from you is, you can take this in any direction, but like, do you have an idea, like when you look at what skills will be important in the near future? Do you have like a handy list that you go to? What are your thoughts?
So when you say skill, if someone who's coming into an organization, what kind of skill they should have? Yes, it's going to be very different from what they had so far. One is the technological skills that people need to have to even get into a decent job is going to be much higher than where it was before. So any industry, you take any industry, the automation is getting higher and higher. That was always been the case. But now with the added complexity of AI, an average person, he's going to find it very difficult if they just don't have AI skills, or if they don't have a technology skills. Most of the jobs have transitioned to a technology job, a job with technology skills driving their skill set. So the way the employees are going to be hired in the future are very different. Right? Now, if you look at it, even the big corporations are taking out people whose skill set is dated compared to what is required. Our CTO mentioned one thing that is very interesting. He said, Mahesh, February 6th is a date, we call it AC and BC. I said, what are you saying? Right? He said, February 6th is the one where there's a before Claude and AC is after Claude. So he said that technologies that we have hired, BC, before Claude, their skill set also had to be transformed for AC, because the way they do the work is going to be very different from the way they were doing work. So that statement was so valid, and it has changed the way we work, changed the way we operate, and so on and so forth, right? So this very different world we are living in. So the skill set is going to be very different. And the productivity expectation is going to be much higher than where it was before. So we always had productivity as a benchmark for our economic growth, right? That has been the U.S. Measurement, and it's going to be even more highly expected in the future than what it is today. I expect from myself, right? There are things that I used to take so much more time to do it that I'm able to do it in a much faster time frame. So that is expectation is going to be, spread across teams and people and all that, right? It's going to be a very different high expectation from people's standpoint. Fewer people are going to be hired for a job.
I mean, vast majority of my life has been before Claude, and I older person. I have over the last year or so learned to incorporate it those kinds of tools in a way that lets me focus on what I am better at and what is unique to me. And I think that's the key. I think what might be interesting too is I don't know how long from now, decade, 2 decades from now, will those BC workers be missing some of the things that the AC workers had. I mean, I'm sorry,
Correct.
the after Claude,
Yeah, see, guys.
workers, will they be missing something that the before Claude workers
Yes.
have
Yes.
inherently? And is the cycle going to then kick back? Right? Because
Yes.
we already talk about here, Brandon Hall Group, that you've got to focus on those human skills. You got to focus on what makes us unique. And whatever your job is, there's something in there that makes you, and you have a unique skill, to bring to it. But then how much does that diminish over time the more and more people rely on these tools?
Yes. Yes. But our
Maybe we'll get
country
back
has
together 10
always
years
been
from now.
automation. Yeah, it's going to be very challenging, right? How do you do it? How do you incorporate technology? Because if you don't do it, somebody else is doing it, then you are falling behind. That's the challenge everybody is trying to
Mhm.
overcome, right? So as you said, one day people are gonna say, "Oh my God, why can't I be without any AI?" But that is not happening in the next 5 years. Eventually,
No,
it will.
but it is all cyclical. It's all this relatively the same story at some point or other. I mean, I went through this with the advent of the smartphone, and do
Yes,
you allow people to use their smartphone at work? Do you allow them to use it for this, for that? And then, to have that conversation now, people look at you sideways. Like, what do you mean? Why would I not use my phone for almost everything? But it
yes,
was only a few years ago that there was this big, well, we can't have that, and we don't know if we should use that. So,
it
it
changes.
changes the acceptability level, the comfortable level changes, and then the discussion changes. What are we focusing on? Once the acceptance is there, okay, now what are the ins and outs of it?
A good experiment is going to be schools are banning phones. Let's see how kids are surviving a day without phones and how that transforms them. That's a good real world experiment. We will have some outcome on what kids are going to do without phones in their school.
Yeah, well, and it's the people who want to. I think you're right. It's a good experiment. I feel like the people who want those experiments to happen are people like my age who had that experience. But that's the difference. Is I didn't know anything different. Like, it wasn't as though you were
Correct.
taking something away from me. I think it'd be very interesting to see what happens if you have it and are aware of it and then can't use it. I think that's a completely different story, and one that you know my generation can't have any real perspective on because
Yes.
we never had that.
Yeah. We never had one. Yeah, I never had one. I don't even know what that is. So
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter.
Fascinating stuff. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time and speaking with me today, Mahesh, and covering a lot of the different ground that we did. And I appreciate your insights into how you got here and a little bit about how Trainery operates and some of the things that you provide. Is there anything else you want to share before I let you go? I'll let you have sort of like the last take.
I really want to thank David Yu and Brandon Hall for this opportunity. I think our partnership, I hope, can keep growing and expanding and doing different things. So I really look forward to it. It's been great experience for me. Thank you for your time. Everyone, Brandon Hall, they've been helping me above and beyond in this partnership.
Well, that's what we're here for, and I appreciate that. And it's always great talking to you, whether we're recording it or not. So I look
Thank you.
forward to having another conversation with you soon. So thanks again.
No problem. Thank you. Talk to you then. And I'm going to see you in one of those conferences, I'm sure.
You won't be able to avoid me.
Thank you. Thanks, David.